Hello there. This is MD. Here with you on SaskiYano. Here we go again. We are in a new After Effects tutorial. In this tutorial, so far you've learned how to use After Effects in 2 dimensions. But now it's time to kick it up to 2.5D. So let's talk about what 2.5D is. The 2.5D, and what that is creating a 3D environment out of objects that only have 2 dimensions. Look, now there are lots of examples of this that you've probably seen throughout your life. And it may have not clicked before. You may have seen something that looked like the video had frozen and the camera sort of flies through the environment. That could very well have been a 2.5D shot, which is where you create something that looks very 3D, but all of the objects have no 3rd dimension. So when I show you how to put together a really simple example, in fact, this is gonna look even cooler than that last example. Even though I'm only going to use text. So jump on into this basic 2.5D composition. If you want to follow along, make sure you open up to 2.5D After Effects project. So in this project, I have 3 text layers and a solid background layer that's been locked, and we're just gonna get right into it here. So to start, I want you to take the 3 text layers. I want you to enable the 3D layer switch here, which you may have seen before. Now we're gonna kick in action. And when you do, you'll notice that the anchor point has now changed to a 3D gizmo. This is what this is usually referred to in 3D applications. It's a little tool that has 3 handles or arrows that let you position the object or rotate the object in 3 dimensions. So we have X, Y, and Z. And in fact, if you twirl down and take a look at the transform properties, you'll see that a lot of these, in fact all of them except opacity, now have a 3rd dimension. Anchor point now has an X, Y, and Z position. X, Y, Z scale, X, Y, and Z rotation. Well, rotation looks pretty different. We have 2 things. We have orient in X, Y, Z. We also have rotation in X, Y, and Z. We don't have to dive into that too much right now, because I'm gonna show you how to set up an After Effects camera and a light to get a really cool looking 3D look here. Next, let's throw in an After Effects camera. Right click down in a blank area. Go to a new camera. And you can select the 35mm presets. And click OK. Lots of options in there for you to explore. We don't have time to get into right now. No, nothing will have actually changed right now, because all of these objects, if you press P to bring up their position, these are sitting at the 0 mark in 3D space. But we can move these around and get a really cool look. So I'm gonna take this back text layer here. I'm gonna click on Z in the position and put it at 4000. And you can see it got smaller. It actually just moved away from the camera in this 3D environment. I'm gonna do something similar with the middle layer. I'm gonna put that at 2000 pixels away from the camera. And now, if you press C on the keyboard, you can bring up the camera tool. And by default, that should have selected the unified camera tool, which is what you are looking at here. If it didn't, and it looks like this, or this, or this. Just press C one more time to select the unified camera tool. These other tools, the orbit camera tool, to track XY camera tool, and the track Z camera tool, are all baked into this unified camera tool. It's one tool that contains all of these 3. And it's much easier to use. So, with the unified camera tool, if you click and drag the left mouse button We'll orbit the middle mouse button. We'll track in X and Y. And the right mouse button will track in the Z dimension. And once you do that, things start to become really cool looking. Now we're moving in 3 dimensions. Look at that. This has a distinctive 3D look to it. And that's because the After Effects camera acts just like a real camera. Now we can keep this up another notch by adding a light to this, which will give us some shading. So I'm gonna right click in a blank area here. I'm gonna go to New, Light. I'm just gonna leave everything at the default values here. Make sure Cast Shadows is on. Things may get dark, but don't worry. We can jump down into the light options. By the way, when you're working in this 3D environment, pressing AA on the keyboard will bring up the material options. And it's usually the thing that you want to jump into when you're talking about the light options, the camera options, where the material options for the text. You'll see that more in just a minute. So I'm gonna jump to the light options here. And I'm going to increase the radius. And I'm also going to increase the fall off until I can start to see my layers in the background there. Y has already had a pretty good intensity. Turn it down a little bit. Sort of retain more of that color, which has been set to kind of almost white. Alright, that's pretty good. This you can see this light is doing a great job of making things look like the further back they are away, the last light they get. And you can turn that off, because that is called fall off. That kind of mimics the way real lights work in the real world, which fall off based on the inverse square law. So with every doubling of the distance that you do, the light is at a quarter intensity. You don't really have to know that. Just know that if you set this to smooth, that you get a really natural light fall off, which is pretty cool. Now, you may have also noticed that I mentioned to make sure Cast Shadows was enabled. Right now, we're not seeing any shadows, but if you select your 3 text layers here and you press AA on the keyboard, we'll jump into the materials option. And because they're still selected, if I take the first layer here and I change Cast Shadows from off and I click and drag to the right, it'll go to on, and then you will see in your layer. Now we have shadows being cast. They're being cast from this first layer to the second layer and the third layer, and from the second layer to the third layer. If you jump back to the selection tool and you grab your light and you move it just a little bit on the X-axis or the Y-axis or even the Z-axis, you'll see your shadows change. And so you can set up these After Effects lights. You can set up multiple lights and create some really cool looks. Using this kind of 2.5D method, you can change the shadow's darkness. You can change the shadow's diffusion. So you can get more of a hard shadow or a really soft shadow. Lots of cool options there. There's a few more things that I want to cover with you in this project, but that'll have to wait for the next tutorial. So check that out. See you in the next tutorial. Bye. Finally, we are done for today. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and leave your comment down below in the comments section. Also, if you want to learn more, take a look at our first channel, Everything PS. See you next time. Bye.